John, you're looking awful dapper sitting down there.
Yeah, doesn't he?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm really liking the goatee.
I know, that's what I said, because I've had it for a while. I'm like, really?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, why are we talking about it?
Yeah,
I was wondering the same thing, John.
he's had it for like a month. I'm so sorry they don't.
More than a month.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's gotten fuller. It's fuller.
Okay.
It's more noticeable.
It's the silver hair is what
I thought he was born with it, so. Yeah, that's so funny. We're now talking about it.
Go away.
All right.
you know, my wife has it, you know, she just let it go natural. I'm like, great, if you let it go natural, I don't have to die instantly.
Okay, so I told the group in the back we'd start in 30 seconds. So if they did start in 30 seconds, everybody has enjoyed this conversation. So, all right, we're going to start in 5 seconds now. For real. Good afternoon. No. Good morning. And welcome to Orange County's work session, which has been scheduled for today, Tuesday, February 11th, 2025, for the purpose of discussing JCA, assignment of students to school, and KCE, ethics and lobbying policy. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in this work session to provide public comments because it's not a regularly scheduled school board meeting. No action will be taken. There'll be no open public comment period in which the public would normally address the board on topics that are relevant to the board's work. So with that, in spite of that, for those of you who are joining us that are not members of Orange County Public Schools staff, thank you for being here. Do a quick roll call. Vice Chair Byrd. Member Salamanca.
Good morning.
Good morning. Member Ferrant.
I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. Member Douglas.
Good morning.
Good morning. Member Vanos.
Good morning.
Good morning. Member Gallo.
Good morning.
And Member Felder is not with us. Madam Superintendent, do you happen to know if she is going to be joining us? We believe so.
Yes, Madam Chair, she will be joining us.
In person.
Yes,
Okay.
she'll be joining
All
in
right.
person.
Thank you. So the minutes will reflect that when she joins us. As a reminder, board members will not be engaging in outside electronics or digital communication during the meeting so that we can focus on the matters immediately before us. To my fellow board members and district staff, when speaking, please make sure your microphone is turned on. Speak directly into it, very close to it, so that our YouTube and Orange TV viewers can hear you clearly. With that, we will now pause for a moment of silence, and I invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And now for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first item on our agenda is JCA, assignment of students to school. And I will turn the floor over to Dr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We this morning will have our General Counsel, John Palmerini, walk us through both policies. Mr. Greg Moody is involved in, I believe, an arbitration this morning, but we do have members of his team here. You're all familiar with them. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Palmerini.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent, members of the board. Can you hear me? Is the mic on?
It may be, but if it is, you're not close enough to it. Do you think?
How about now?
Yes.
Okay.
I wasn't kidding. I mean, you really have to practically be touching the mics
Yes.
here.
That's always good for hygiene.
Absolutely.
Members of the board, we are here today on JCA, policy JCA, assignment of students to schools. There is no red line here for the policy. There's been a couple board members that have approached me saying they would like to discuss school choice matters and, expanding choice in areas where students can go to schools and in what ways we would allow transfers. So what the purpose of today's work session is to get board member feedback on potential changes you would like to see in our transfer policy, assignment of students to schools. There's
Mr. Palmery, if
Yes,
I can
ma'am.
interrupt you for just a minute. I'm being told that the policy is not up on BoardDocs at this time.
there's no red line of it, so it's the standard.
Okay.
It's just the policy itself. If they went to our policy website, they could see it. We can have our folks put in just
Yeah.
the policy itself into BoardDocs.
Yeah, if they can do that while we're working through that,
Yeah.
it would be helpful. I hear what you're saying. I just, on behalf of members of the public, I think it's easier for them if they're following our agenda not to have to find our policies.
I
yeah.
completely
Okay.
understand.
But I understand why it wasn't required. Okay, so we'll work on getting that up as you go forward. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. So the purpose of this is to turn the discussion over to the board so you all can have a discussion about what kinds of changes you would like to see with respect to choice options, transfers. I know one board member had had a question or a concern about magnets, and that would also be something that we could discuss here. And then if we need to bring back the magnet policy separately along with policy JCA after we've gotten your thoughts, we can most certainly do that. But the purpose was to allow you all to give ideas to staff about what kinds of changes you want to see with respect to choice. So I essentially want to turn it over to the board. We will listen to the discussion. Myself, along with Stacy Neal and her staff, will be here to answer any questions you may have about particular provisions of the policy, but I wanted to turn it over to the board for discussion.
Alrighty, thank you. Member Gallo, I'm not sure if you pushed your button to speak to this or if it was to note that it wasn't on BoardDocs, but you're recognized.
Thank you, and I did. I was pushing my button about the BoardDocs, but I can go ahead and kick us off. So I was one of the board members that asked us to review this policy, and the reason that I wanted to review the policy is in light of our declining enrollment and in light of the competition that we're experiencing with the FES scholarships. I think it's important now more than ever to review this policy and make sure that we're doing everything that we can to recruit and retain as many students as we can. And sometimes the parameters within this policy make it difficult for us to do that. We oftentimes, in my experience, in conversations that I've had with constituents and residents of Orange County, they have to jump through multiple hoops. And when I was having a conversation with Dr. Vasquez, I said, we need to make it easier. We need to make it easier for kids to enroll, especially in those schools that are under capacity. We need to look at it maybe in a case-by-case basis versus a fast rule. And I think that I would love to see open enrollment. I know other districts have incorporated enrollment where they're really let any child go to any school that they want. It's a smaller county, and I understand that creates more challenges for us because we are a larger county. But I think moving forward, we're going to have really thorough and deep conversations about this policy and how we can accommodate our students and provide the best customer service that we can, because we're no longer in the area where you're in a zone and you go to that school. You have choices. You have lots of choices. And we always want OCPS to be the best choice for our students. And in doing so, we need to be a little bit more accommodating on what that looks like and how we do it. So I just wanted to review this policy and look at a few things that I think off the bat we can change. The larger conversation would be about like open enrollment, because that makes it extremely difficult for our student enrollment to actually do projections and opening schools. But as a district, we're going to have to start having tough conversations about schools that are under-enrolled. And what does that look like? And does that look like targeted rezoning? Does that look like we need to maybe consolidate schools? And those are all scary conversations that it's our responsibility to look at, because we need everybody going to the best learning environment with the best teachers. And in order for us to provide that, we really got to look at the cost of some of these smaller schools being open. So this is to start that conversation and to make changes right now that we can, that make sense, that'll make easier for students to choose to go to other schools other than their zone schools.
All right, thank you, Member Gallo. Member Ferrant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This thing is stuck. Okay, so my big thing that I've seen just in my area, and I just want to make sure that this policy does state this already, but siblings of students who, let's say a student goes to a school, they want to enroll in a school, they're in kindergarten, they sign up to get in, and they are able to get into that school. Say it's a open enrolled school, and so they get in, and now the school closes that enrollment and they don't ever open enroll again. It's now closed. I had this situation. Now this kindergartner is now in first, second grade. Now their younger sibling comes up and they also want to go to the same school. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but this policy does not, did we ever fix that where the policy now has the option for that younger sibling to automatically enroll in that school?
Not automatically, but yes, it's on all our policies or all our transfers that siblings may apply for the transfer if there's capacity at that school.
If there's capacity. So that's where I would like to eliminate that part. If we allow one sibling in, if we allow one we allow the whole family, and that's just as if they live in that zoned area. That would be my request, because we can't expect families now, their kid is in second, third grade, and the younger sibling is coming up, and now the family has to decide: do we remove our child from this amazing school that we love, that we've grown to really be a part of, and put them into our zone school, or do we pull them all together? So now you have parents starting to question, and then they get frustrated with the district when the younger sibling can't just automatically go in. So I would like to propose that we, if one sibling is able to go into a school for like an open enrollment, I maybe can understand the magnet program. If it's something where you're getting in based on your ability, Boone High School, for instance, with their, oh my word, I'm losing my train of thought. Yes, Law Magnet, any of those magnets that they have. Finance Magnet is the one I'm thinking of. So if you don't have the, maybe the academic rigor to get into that, I can understand that then like the next sibling, if they don't have that, what it takes to get in. But when it's an open enrolled case, I would like to see that the whole family gets right in there.
So the wording says may, however, we do accommodate siblings. So,
but only if there's capacity.
The wording says, but we do accommodate siblings.
So then I think we need to say that, because otherwise the schools say, well, no, this isn't, and they push back, and now the parent has to reach out, and it just makes it a little more cumbersome.
Two things. I'm going to call on the superintendent, but could we bring back the sibling language that I just saw, that portion? Because I do think that.
Give me a second.
Okay. You had it up a second ago, and it was really helpful. Siblings of a student granted medical transfer may be eligible, so as long as there's capacity.
So this language on siblings is replicated in numerous other sections like ESE 504 transfers. So it repeats itself over and over, right? So it says siblings of a student granted, and whatever the transfer is, may be eligible for transfer to same school so long as the school has an available seat for the sibling is not over capacity.
Okay. Right. Dr. Vasquez, I'm sorry, did you want to be recognized? It looked like, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We certainly can look at the verbiage and maybe outline more specifically how we make that accommodation. I am very cautious of saying all. There may be some circumstances where a sibling may have very specific needs, may require intensive services that are not available at the school. And so in those particular cases, we may not be able to accommodate because the units that serve them are not there. Even with the magnets, you mentioned Boone's Finance magnet, we could make an accommodation where they're not going to the magnet, but they could then go to Boone as a student and not be part of that magnet. Of course, we have a few select schools that it's the school in and of itself is a magnet across all grade levels. In those cases, we would not be able to do that. But I think that's a great idea that we take a look at the verbiage and make it a little bit more clearer, while still maintaining a word that doesn't say every single child will be automatically part of that transfer.
And just to recap, Magnet did institute, or is that a good word? They did implement siblings in their policy that is processed through our office.
So maybe we could just put something like some exceptions may apply, and then that way we have kind of the out, and it helps, because I totally agree. Like if you have a child with critical needs that can't be serviced at the school, then we would say, we would love to accommodate you. However, this school will not help your child in that aspect, but we have this school that could. I think that would be great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Member Ferrant. Member Byrd, Vice Chair.
Thank you. The superintendent hit on the magnet choice with, allowing a student that maybe wouldn't qualify for the magnet to go in, and maybe some verbiage like provided any specific needs that sibling has can be met at that school, then they could be, something to that effect. And I appreciate the sibling brought up by Member Ferrant. I think that that's definitely an area that we could make it just easier, so it's not in question. And I agree with Member Gallo that, the issue of customer service, I think, is a big issue. And I think that especially when it comes to registration issues, when a parent is new to OCPS and this is their first interaction with OCPS, and it's challenging or difficult or way more challenging than it really should be, that puts a bad taste in their mouth for the entire experience with OCPS, which is not typically what they would probably experience maybe at the school. So I do think that as far as that goes, that needs to be addressed for sure. And I'm all in favor of doing whatever we can to make all those processes easier. However, I do have some concerns when we get into a bigger conversation of, open enrollment or more choice. While I agree with more choice, and I think that there definitely needs to be a case-by-case basis, and it needs to be a lot easier. I have, schools that parents choose not to put their kids in those schools, not necessarily for reasons that, are academic needs or that school wouldn't serve the needs of their kids, but for reasons that we've worked really hard to overcome in this district and in districts all across the country. So I think we have to be really, really careful, because I think what could happen is it could just make some of these lower enrolled schools make it even worse. And I think a lot of that has to do with, I talk about this a lot with Mr. Martinez as well, the marketing of schools and how we share and we've talked about this a lot, how we share what our schools are doing. Parents need to know that. But I have some real hesitation with allowing parents to just choose anywhere to go. Because of that. So I don't know if that was real clear, but yeah, okay. Thank you. That's kind of what I want to share on that as far as specifics within the policy. I'm not really there yet, but I just kind of wanted to get that thought out first. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair. So let me. I agree, but maybe this will make it more clear, without being too offensive in my language. So I personally, it was extremely important to me that my kids went to public schools. Not about academics, but about the diversity in our schools. I wanted my kids in a diverse school. I'm from a different generation than most of you, and I saw too many people my age that did not have the ability, well, they had the ability, they just didn't know how to interact with people that were different from them. And I mean, I would hear this. We had African-American principal. I love her. She's still today a dear friend. And one of my neighbors who was also a dear friend told me she had a problem and she didn't know how to talk to people like that. This really happened when my kids were little. And I didn't even understand what that meant because we're all speaking English, so I didn't get it. But that further reinforced how valuable it is for our kids to grow up in not just racially diverse, but diverse in thought. Diversity is such a strength to our youth and to our society. And so I appreciate what you're saying, that we might have some families who don't see that as a strength. What they see as a strength is a school where the student is the majority and where they feel comfortable. So for that reason, I entirely agree with you. Fortunately, we're not talking about whole-scale open enrollment, but that would be a concern. And equity in our schools continues to be a concern. It was one of my concerns when I learned that OCPS was, I'm trying to remember what the term is.
The desegregation?
When you're not under the desegregation party, what is it called?
Unitary.
Yeah, unitary. That sounds so good, but in middle school, junior high school, it was the first time that desegregation was in place in my school district when I was in junior high school. And because that shaped my life moving forward and enriched it in so many ways, I was concerned about the unification and how much we might lose diversity in our own schools. So I want to double down and agree with you. I think it is a potential issue, and while it may help us compete with private schools, there's a point at which I don't think we sacrifice the values we believe in to compete. So I think we just have to prove ourselves on other grounds as much as we can. I definitely appreciate where Member Ferrant is coming from. I want to see, though, language. So when I read that particular language, it says they may if there's capacity. I mean, it's really clear cut, and I don't want a situation where we have a parent standing here and saying, you're violating your policy with that family. They're in my school, and you're violating your policy. So I want it to be clear we're not violating our policy. I think there's easy ways to, and I think it was either one of my fellow board members suggested some language. I think we can get to that real easily. And the other thing that's obvious in that particular section is it's only for 1 year or on a yearly basis. So, okay, I don't know what I saw, but it was like the sibling. I saw, something about the sibling being eligible for only 1 year. Can you?
It was only for certain transfers, like the grandfathered, because if I'm there for my final year, we would allow that sibling to remain after a rezoning with that grandfathered sibling, or an rising transfer. The child is in their last year of school there, so their sibling can stay. But that's the only reference to a year. Otherwise, they're there the duration.
Okay. Who's working the is that, can you pull back up that section that you had referenced for us?
I'm going
Yeah, it
to
wasn't-
do so. Give me a...
Yeah, it's okay. It wasn't that one. I mean, it was up for a second. But bottom line, let's just, we'll rely on y'all to just,
Well-
make it consistent with whatever the board ultimately decides.
We'll find it in all places and make
Yeah,
it consistent.
exactly. Okay. All right. Next up is Member Vanos, and I'm going to ask that you run the meeting for just a minute or two. Member Vanos, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also just wanted to quickly say I appreciate what was said about siblings. I think that's been a huge gap, and I think it's really important that we help our families by keeping siblings together. And I appreciate what's been done with the middle schools this year, and the magnet. So thank you. Also wanted to touch on, there have been a couple of comments about when it comes to transfers, having transfers be done on a case-by-case basis. This makes me nervous. I don't like case-by-case basis. I think people need to know what the policy is, and I think we need to follow it, because I think it sets up a situation where, if you have an advocate mom or an advocate dad, you're maybe, more likely to get something. I think we need to think of all kids equally, and having case-by-case basis just makes me nervous. So I just wanted to make that point. And then kind of the third point, talking about magnet schools. This is, it kind of bleeds into open enrollment a little bit too. A line that I have said when I've been talking to, state lawmakers is public school parents like public school choices. And I firmly believe that. I am a magnet school mom. I think our magnet schools provide some really great opportunities for our students. And I also think that there's a danger with magnet schools. And this is hitting a little bit on what Member Byrd said, that they're not really accessible to everybody. Our magnet schools don't provide transportation. And so the only people who can really go to magnet schools are people whose parents can drop them off in the morning, parents whose, can pick them up after school. If you want to do a sport in middle school and you're in a magnet school, you also have to have a parent come pick you up at 4 o'clock, then there's no bus to take you to an after school activity. So to me, the way that it's happening now is not fair. And I support magnet schools, and I believe in magnet schools. I actually think we need more, but I just want to open up the conversation to ways that we can make magnet schools work. Maybe it is by having more like regional magnet schools, using templates of magnet schools that have worked in one area and doing them in another area. Maybe it's, I think transportation, I think we just need to relook at transportation, period. I don't think we can have schools where we are not offering transportation to our students. Maybe we have depots where, buses can pick students up in certain places to take them to schools. Maybe we have passenger vans. I'm just throwing ideas out there of possible solutions and ways to make it more fair. I'd love to hear from other you all and other members as well. And then I think the third point is, the other concern I have with magnets is, and I think this transportation is an issue, but I think it's also awareness of the magnet program. And again, in order for a student to participate in a magnet school, you have to have a parent that knows what the process is paying attention, applies to the magnet. And so I would like to see more efforts to go out and recruit students to be in our magnet schools, to go out into areas where we typically don't have as many students applying to magnet schools. And, if that means for some period of time that there is a minimum percentage of our magnet schools that, have, kids from a certain area or kids from certain socioeconomic demographic, maybe that needs to happen. I just think we need to do a better job of making sure that our magnet schools truly are open to everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Member Banos. Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple of things. I get the concern about some schools being under-enrolled while others are full. I understand that argument. But if parents don't want to go there, they're not going to go to that school, and that school's still going to be under-enrolled, and they're either going to choose to go to a school outside the county, or they're going to choose to go to a charter school, or they're going to choose to go to a private school using FES. So I think the days of us being able to control what a parent or a student decides to do is gone, and I think we need to shift our mindset to how do we keep students in Orange County Public Schools? What does that look like? And if a school is under-enrolled, then we need to look at why is that school under-enrolled, and why are students and parents choosing not to send their kids there, and what can we do to maybe lift that school up? And if we can't lift that school up, then that's another conversation that we need to have, which is going to be uncomfortable and awkward. But we have to do what's right by all students. And spending money on schools that are under-enrolled when we could place students in a newer, better school and offer more money to our teachers, those are the hard decisions that we're going to have to make that we promised. We promised our teachers that we would look at. And this is a first step into really looking at that process and how we do it. And I often say, we can either be Blockbuster or Netflix. Which one do we choose to be? Because we can be Blockbuster and we can keep doing what we've been doing and we can see if it works out for us, or we can right now start having those conversations and be innovative and be forward thinking on what we want OCPS to look like and how we ensure that every student chooses OCPS and gets the best high quality education that we can offer. So that's kind of where my mind is coming from. And to Member Vanos's point about magnet schools and busing, I agree we need to look at busing. Anything that we can do that innovative, depot, smaller buses, that's fine. But we also don't bus for dual enrollment. There's a lot of things that are inequitable if you look within the makeup or the scope of the decisions or the policies that we have. Like dual enrollment is a great program, but unless you have access to a car, you can't do dual enrollment because not every school has classes on campus for dual enrollment. Most of them don't, like East River maybe has one or two. And I understand why we don't. It's difficult with the calendar. Their calendar is different than us and they can just choose not to show up. I get the issues with it, but that's still another inequity. And that's a huge one because that's free college. That's free college. So those are just some of my thoughts about that, but I do want to kind of just go through this quickly with some of the things that I've highlighted that I would like us to look at. The first is a number 2, change of address. It says any application containing erroneous or false information may be grounds for denial of a requested transfer or the immediate revoking the transfer. So I guess my point is, I don't know if maybe we can be a little bit more detailed in that, but if they're in open enrollment and they move and they're in a school that they're open enrollment for, yes, we need to have their information so we can contact them, but I don't know that we should be revoking their transfer if they're in an open enrollment school that we've already said has capacity they can attend for the duration of that school. Why, if their information is incorrect, we're going to revoke their transfer. Like, that makes no sense to me. It needs to be more specific, maybe to zoned areas, and maybe we just need to kind of dial into that a little bit. Applications. So this one is one that I've gotten a lot of calls on, and so I'm trying to discern which is our policy and which is the law that we have to abide by. So it says guardians who wish to apply for transfer to a school other than the assigned school for their child for one of the reasons set forth below in section 6 must submit a completed application based on the criteria listed in each individual subsection. And then it says the guardians must attach appropriate proof of legal guardianship. Okay, that's fine. A parenting plan. Is it by law that we have to require a parenting plan? An affidavit, is that a law? An educational guardianship for the first time students to OCPS. do we need that and a birth certificate? Like, wouldn't the birth certificate kind of provide that information? I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I want us to make it as easy as possible on parents who are just trying to get their child into one of our schools. And so if there's anything within the application process that we can remove to make it easier on our parents, that would be appreciated, because right now they have to go down to do enrollment. To student enrollment. And if you're on my side of town, that's not very close. And you're missing work and you're doing this to go all the way down there and then not have the information that you thought you had, and then to be told you have to come back. Like, it's a laborious process. So if we could streamline that or make that easier, that would be great. And I'm just going to go through all my things. In every single one of these things, it says, oh.
Hang on. There's a lot to unpack in that. Hang on, Dr. Vasquez.
No, but can we clarify, because that's not, you have to add everything. It's one of those items. And so maybe it's our verbiage, because you don't have to provide, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you must provide either, and maybe that's the word we need there, proof of legal guardianship or a parenting plan or affidavit. It's not that you provide all of those things.
It's not. That's not the way it's worded.
Yeah. Actually, before we
it
move
is
forward,
the way it's worded. It's just being misinterpreted. We don't have the word either in there, but that's how I understood it. Yeah. So we can rechange. It's not that we're requiring all of those things.
So just legally, when you see the word or, it means a choice of any of that list. If it had said and, then it would mean everything in that list. But we can certainly clarify it to say any of the following, to something like that.
Yeah, in this case, the or is after affidavit and before education. I was scanning it really quick.
But the parenting plan is necessary?
Yeah.
Because the or is just between affidavit or education.
No, it's a whole thing.
It's just the grammar.
It's appropriate grammar, it's just being misunderstood. So we have to format it.
It's appropriate grammar, but not friendly to those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, great. And then I guess all we really need to do is reformat that paragraph.
Okay, before we go forward, can we pause just for a minute on the erroneous information question you had about booting our students out? Because I don't think that's what it says either. But can we go back to that language? Maybe you could do a search on erroneous.
It says may be grounds for denial or requested transfer or immediate.
It may be.
May.
So I think to your point, if somebody has moved and they haven't updated the information, it's not they're automatically.
But the threat of it is there. So I was just recommending that maybe we reword that into a more friendly tone.
And it applies to an application. So I read it as not a change to somebody who's already there, but an application. So you're asking you presented your address, your application, you know where you live today. Once you get in, if you move, I don't think that B applies. But these are really great issues. And I think this is a great conversation. It's exactly why we have work sessions.
Sure. And
I'm really the different perspectives, but at the same time, what I also hear is kind of a common goal. So I just wanted to bridge the gap on that for anybody who might be tuning in. So
I have had an issue with somebody applied. Yeah. The reason that this got brought back a few months ago was so I just want it to be clear. Yes. And so if the application, I don't know, maybe we need to look at what erroneous or false information would be on that application that would be a cause for the transfer to be revoked.
So we have parents who will put a user address and they're not residing at that address, or we have situations such as where we ask for the proof of legal guardianship, and parents will say they have separated and are living somewhere and they are not, or we will have someone who is not the legal parent or guardian provide an application, and they're not the ones who should be providing information. And what happens is when something is approved from the district, they take it to the school, and the school thinks, well, because the district office approved it, then it is okay. And then we end up having further legal situations with who's there to register, and the information they're providing is not the same information that they would have provided to our office. So we try to streamline it as much as we possibly can by obtaining the correct information from the parents. There was the one situation where the mom and dad had an active lease in one area with lights, water, cable, IDs, everything matching, and then they were separating, and the other parent had a handwritten lease to another address to get into the school zone that they wanted and could not provide, that they were actually residing at the address that they wanted their child to go to the school. And one parent, when you're married, has no more rights over the other one. And we've had situations where we've had a parent say they're separated and will move a child to one school using information that may not be accurate or correct. And then that parent will come, the other parent will come, withdraw the child, and then we have a ping pong of a child back and forth. So a lot of situations or wording that we try to put into the policies to help alleviate certain real life situations we've had. And not always are we able to maybe accurately word it, but we try to get the intent. So we will work on it, but that section is, we need to see who the legal guardian is. We've had parents who are separated, shouldn't even have contact with their kids, and will do an application and take the approval to the school, and we don't know. So we try to help the schools out as much as we possibly can. So what looks and sounds like difficulties at times, it probably is, because if you have everything you need, think about it, 200,000 students. If you have everything you need to register, you have no difficulty. It's only parents who have situations that have the difficulties. And those are the ones you hear about. And sometimes they bypass my office because they want to go above and beyond to get, in. And if they start, which I know you're saying is difficult for some parents to get to us, but if they start with us, sometimes we can rectify it and get it handled. A lot of those calls and emails that you receive, they haven't even talked to us.
I understand that, and I appreciate that. I guess what I'm asking for is, if they're going to a school that is under capacity that we would probably give them an open enrollment to anyways, then I don't know that they need to jump through all these hoops. And I would also, and I'm sure that student enrollment is, but us to be cognizant that when a family is going through a separation or a divorce, that's already really difficult. It's really difficult on the kids. And so I just don't ever want to do anything to add to an already difficult situation. So anytime we can make the process smooth, and it could be that they may not be doing it on purpose. They may not know that they need to go to student enrollment. I would have just, if I was switching schools for my kids, I would have just taken all the information based on my new address to the new school, to the registrar. It would never have occurred to me that I needed to go to student enrollment first before I enrolled my kids into a school. I just would have gone to the new school. So that could just be parents not understanding what they need to do. And we live in a society where, a lot of these parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, have multiple kids that are in multiple events. They're already extremely probably busy and underwater. So in looking through this policy, and I know that Member Front brought it up earlier, but it does say in any time that we offer a transfer and it refers to the siblings, it does say may, and it does say if there's capacity. So if that really doesn't apply, then if we could kind of change that verbiage throughout this whole policy, that would be really great. And then on C, under...
Can we, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Can we pause and
I'm just seeking clarification, if I may.
okay.
So is the board wanting us to do transfers if the school is over capacity? Because removing that verbiage is what you would be saying. And I thought what we wanted to do is clarify that there are some situations that may qualify for the transfer based on extenuating circumstances.
So
I'm sorry. What I heard Stacy say was that they do accommodate transfers, and maybe I missed a part. She said unless there's a capacity issue, but all I heard was that we do accommodate siblings for those transfers.
Correct, but I understood your statement when you said based on capacity to change that, and I just want to clarify what what the board is asking us to change.
I thought that was a process. I'm gonna let the chair can recognize Member up front in 1 minute. But I was under the impression that regardless of capacity, that I thought that this is what we were already doing, and I was just suggesting if this is what we're already doing, then the verbiage should mimic what we're doing. But if I misunderstood what Ms. O'Neill said, then I...
So if I can just, because this is getting complicated. First of all, to Dr. Vasquez's question, we've had some dialogue on this. The board has not rendered an opinion or a suggestion. I am trying to keep notes of what the issues are, so at the end we can circle back to see if there's consensus. Thank you for bringing that up. To Member Gallo's point, I think I also understood that capacity was not a deciding factor for siblings, even though, and this is where I had concern, that language told me that they may be considered if there's capacity. So I read that language that if there's not capacity, and I hear you saying, is capacity going to be a determining factor?
So if there's capacity, we are not automatically accepting every sibling. If there are special circumstances where a child has specific needs that cannot be met at that school, we would not approve that transfer. Am I incorrect on that?
So it's the flip side of the issue. If there is not capacity, would we accept a sibling? I read this as no.
Like general sibling.
And I hear you saying, is the board wanting to change that? And I heard Ms. Neal say that we don't prohibit a student based on capacity. So can we get clarity on that?
Okay, so, and you're correct, and maybe it's my clarification. So for the most part, most siblings are for younger grade levels, such as your elementary. So it might be a kindergartner or first grade, something to that effect. So we usually do not have issues because those schools, we use capacity as 90%, right? So we say we're not going to do transfers to schools if it is already at 90%. However, if the school is at 90% and we can look at 95% or 100%, then we will allow, and there's conversation with the principals, because this is also an issue. Sometimes they may not have seats in the grade levels that they're requesting for siblings. But for the most part, we have tried to be accommodating. But no, if it's a Timber Creek, if it's a Timber Creek or one of those overcapacity schools, then we cannot. However, we do take, and I know you said you don't like case by case because we should be doing it generally, but that is a situation where we would be doing a great in service and not fiduciary to put a student or students into Timber Creek, for example. But for elementary age students and maybe even some middle schools, that's where you get a lot of your sibling transfers. We're able to accommodate a little more. But yes, we'll change the verbiage to reflect, but it still is a may if the school is over capacity.
So, Dr. Vasquez, back to your point, I think, you have a really valid question. I want an answer too from the board. How do we feel about overcapacity? And are we still going to bring siblings in? But I'm still confused by how we're actually doing this.
Right.
So,
that's why it says may, because it is on a case-by-case basis. So number one, if a school is over capacity, and I will use Lake Nona High School, that was at 4,500 before we were relieving it with the new high school. If a parent had a sibling a student that was already there on a special transfer, and they asked for a sibling to then also go to Lake Nona High School, we probably would deny it because it was already severely over capacity. Now, there may be a situation at a school that is not as overcrowded, but is still over that 90% threshold that they say we have seats in the second grade, yes, we will approve it. One that applies to regardless whatever grade level is a student that has unique needs. If that child has specific needs and resources that are not found at the school, regardless of capacity, we would not approve it because those services would not be there. And in order for us to provide them, we would have to incur incredible cost to replicate the services that they would get, let's say, at the center school or at the zone school that has those services provided. So that's why I was commenting about the capacity issue and may that we could add a statement that there are extenuating circumstances that could result in a sibling being accepted to a school that was over capacity. And that would take into account extenuating circumstances. Just as another point of clarification, Stacy, you brought this up, we currently are using 90%. We were having conversations yesterday at Cabinet about raising that threshold. So that automatically would, in some cases, because a school that is newly opened, that maybe is at 90% capacity and you see that there's growth, we probably would be very cautious in allowing more transfers. But we are looking at changing that cap that would allow for more families to be able to be accepted.
Okay, before we move forward, because the use of the term may here, I still hear different things. So John, if you could help us. I am on page, I think it's page 3. My laptop just froze up. It's C, hang on. It's on page 3, and it's the first C on page 3. Go back up. Okay. C. Siblings may be eligible to transfer with the student who is granted the scholarship as long as the school has available seat for the sibling. So in this case, that may doesn't apply to being able to override the capacity issue. It is you may if there's capacity. So capacity is, at this point, the determining factor hard line based on that.
Why can't we change the may to shall, since you've already put in the paragraph the criteria for it happening?
All I'm trying to get clarification on right this minute, because I'm hearing that may means we don't always comply with capacity, and the policy doesn't say that. To me, the policy says the may doesn't apply. If there's not capacity, there's not capacity, and it's a no.
That's the way I'm reading it is how you just said it is. Yeah. If we do have the capacity, that we may allow that. So,
and if we don't, we won't.
We will not. Yes.
Member Gallo, I'm not saying that this is how we should be. I'm just saying this This particular language in this section is pretty clear, hard line, capacity, you can't go forward. So if the board wants to go in a different direction, yes, we needed to change that language. And frankly, we can just take the capacity part out, and it's a may. But to the superintendent's point of view, I think we need to have a serious conversation about, is that something we agree with? What are the potential ramifications? Is this a rather immaterial number of people, or could it be large enough to be a problem for the district? All those discussions need to take place. Mr. Palmerini.
Madam Chair, so to encompass the situation that the superintendent has referenced, let's say this is a family empowerment scholarship, and maybe not this particular one, but let's say it is a situation where the student may be eligible to transfer. You take out the capacity, but the receiving school doesn't have the services to provide for that student. So if you say shall in that instance, then you're required to transfer them without having the services. So I think leaving the may in there is going to be necessary to handle those one-off situations.
Yeah, I agree. But we could modify this language if capacity doesn't count by just striking that last part. Okay. I think we're reasonably clear. Member Ferrant, did you want to respond to this specific issue? Because Member Gallo has the floor unless... Okay, I think we're good at this point. Okay, Member Gallo, back to you.
Thank you. And thank you, John. I appreciate that clarification. I will just state that in every section, it references the IEP, and that if there is not available resources for that IEP at the school, obviously we're not going to allow that transfer. So I don't think that would be a reason enough not to change change the verbiage, because we're not messing with the IEP verbiage. I mean, that has to be. We can't send a child to a school that can't provide the resources that that child needs to thrive. I'm happy to hear that we're looking at the capacity, because that was one of my questions with sibling transfers and whatnot. Can we raise that capacity? Does that make sense so that we can keep families together? So I'm happy to hear that. My next thing that I wanted to look at was number 5, revoking the transfers. So, and I get that that this is a mindset shift that we're going to have to make as a district, and that takes time, and that we're not going to do all these changes immediately. We've kind of got to move in that direction. But my thinking on this part, especially A, where it says it'll be reviewed throughout the year. Upon the review, if there's incidences of excessive tardiness, absenteeism, referrals, disciplinary action, blah, 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 that we can, the transfers may be revoked. We wouldn't ever revoke somebody from their zone school. We're not allowed to. So if they're in one of Orange County Public Schools and we've allowed that transfer, I don't think that this should be a criteria for a student to be removed from that school. I think that this is something that should be handled like it would be in any zone school that we have. Like if disciplinary action needs to be taken, then disciplinary action needs to be taken. If they need to go on an absenteeism plan or the truancy officers need to be involved, then we involve the truancy officers. But I believe that this student should be treated at this school as any other student is treated at any zone school, because it's still our school. They're still a student of Orange County Public Schools. That's my personal opinion. I think that just makes sense to me. I don't know how the board feels about it, but that's how I feel. And then we've already talked about all the mays and the overcapacities. And then on the academic transfer, so I'm on page 4 at E. It says transfer timeline submitted February 1st through April 30th of each year.
I hate to interrupt you. Just give me the previous one. Just give me the location of it.
Oh, the one?
Yeah.
Oh, on the the one on the transfers, that was page 2, number 5.
Okay, thank you.
Is that time frame written in stone? Is that something that we would be able to work with or no?
That is something that's not law-based. That's something that we've done policy-wise on that time frame.
So-
But I would turn it over to Stacy on any logistical issues that it may cause.
So academic transfers are based on a continuation of certain courses from middle school to high school. So what happens is if you're in an Orange County public school trying to continue whatever is not offered at your zone school, and you get a transfer to a school that's offering Mandarin, right? So to transfer a student mid-year after school is started in Mandarin would not be academically sound, I guess. But if you're coming from another state, another county, another country, and you were in Mandarin and now you're transferring, yes, we would allow that exception.
But that exception is not listed in the policy, unless I missed it. So maybe we could add that exception to people coming from other districts or outside the state if they want to do mid-year academic transfers, that we wouldn't hold them to that date. And when we look at consistency, I only brought that up because open enrollment is open year-round for any school under capacity. So just for the sake of being consistent, I don't want to create a hardship for student enrollment, but is that something we can look at? Maybe the answer is no, but I would like us to at least have that conversation or look at it. And then in that same area, it says you have to have a C or a better, and if you don't have a C or a better, then you can lose your academic transfer. And again, we wouldn't kick a student out of their zone school if they have a C or better. We're going to work with them. We're going to help them. We're going to get them tutoring. We're going to try to lift the student up. We're not going to discipline them by removing them from the school. So I don't think we should be doing that for transfers. I don't think that students on a transfer should have different rules apply to them than students that are zoned. I get it. One time we looked at this. This was a privilege. This was a privilege for you to go to the school, but I just don't think we're any longer in a place where we can look at a student and say, "Well, this is a privilege." It's something that we just need to do, in my opinion.
May I, Madam Chair?
Please.
Well, I will tell you that the two that you've just recently brought up are ones that our principals and our teachers would have grave concerns with. A teacher who has a child that is failing, not turning in assignments, not coming to school. Now you're asking her or him for a child that has chosen to come to that school, has asked to come to that school, to exert additional energy. Not that they already aren't doing it, but they're there on a transfer. And so I know from years of being not even just a principal, but a principal supervisor, the chief academic officer, and deputy superintendent. This is one, and Stacy, you could probably chime in. That's one that they use to be able to get the children to come to school, to help to get the children to take advantage of tutoring services. And so I know that would be one. Those two would be ones of grave concern to principals and teachers.
And may I just chime in with the attendance and discipline? So what we've observed is when we give the transfer and parents choose schools that they're not able to get them to, what happens is they have excessive absenteeism or excessive tardiness, and that causes a disruption to the classroom when they're coming in late and they've missed a lot of work. So it's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? A chain effect. If I'm missing first period and coming in for second, then I'm going to start failing first period. So if they're at their zone school, which they could get to either by bus or because it's within the proximity of their home, then they're on time. They're choosing to escape sometimes, and I probably shouldn't say that word, discipline that's going on at their zone school. So that's why that was put in, for a lot of reasons.
Thank you.
And if I may, if they're not coming to school, they're absent or they're tardy, they're missing instruction, which is the whole point of why they're coming to to school. We exist to be able to educate our children. So if they have excessive absences or tardies because they cannot get their child to school, then that defeats the purpose of why we're here. Now, Board Member Vandals brought up the whole transportation issue. I think that if transportation were somehow fit into the equation, that would be different.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez and Ms. Neal. And I understand what you're saying, and I think that's fair, and I think it goes back to what I said earlier about a mind shift. And I want to be very clear that I'm not here to create more burdens for principals or for teachers. But if we had an attendance problems at the zone school, we would handle those attendance problems. We have a lot of attendance problems from students that go to that school, and we have to deal with it, or they face the consequences, whatever those consequences are. I guess in my mind, I don't see why it's different, and I'm not so certain that if we revoked the academic transfer that child would go back to their zone school. There's no guarantee that they would go back to their zone school. They have so many other choices and so many options to do, and so we could lose that child altogether. Again, this is I'm not saying everything changes at once. I'm just saying maybe we just start having that conversation, and maybe we start and see how we can get to a place that we're servicing children well no matter where they are. Because you have teachers every day that have students that aren't showing up, that you have students that are discipline problem, that they have students that are struggling, and they still have to figure out to teach that student. Without any recourse of that student being moved somewhere other than if there is a disciplinary issue, and then they're expelled or suspended or whatnot. So I'm not saying we have to get there today or this week. I'm just saying this is what I would like to see us discuss as we move forward.
Can I just also add, and I apologize.
Sure.
Before a revocation happens, there's a process, or there are processes that have to happen. So it's not just, oh, Johnny or Susie's late,
Right,
and we're going to revoke.
Of course.
It's a process before a transfer is revoked. So all the steps that are taken at their zone school, where they're put on the plan and they have the attendance meetings and things, all of that happens and has to happen, and the principals and administrators have to show that they've done this and put the family on a contract before a transfer is.
So we put forth every effort to.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Can I I'm in trying to figure out the best way to run this meeting. You've brought up a lot of issues. I really like for us to be able to focus on them one at a time,
Okay.
while they're fresh in everybody's mind, and see where the board is. What I fear is going to happen is, remember, Bird is next. She might respond to some. She might have some new ones. At least from the standpoint of chairing this meeting, it is going to be very difficult to land the plane. I think Member Gallo, you mentioned, I don't think we're going to, be honest, I don't think we're going to land the plane on anything today.
No.
From the standpoint, obviously it's a work session, we're not going to make a final decision, but I don't think, given the amount of time we have left, that we're going to even have a chance to really come to consensus. So
I just have two things
okay.
at left, and then
Okay.
I can be done, and then
Okay.
however you choose
Okay.
to go forward, Chair.
Okay, and you have notes down. I'm working really hard to keep up with you,
Yes.
but okay, good.
So academic year completion transfer, it says that
I'm sorry, page and
9,
okay, thanks.
I think that's a J, and it talks about number 3, eligibility, and about academic year completion transfer, and it says the transfer, A says the transfer is only their duration of their current school year. So I was just curious if there is capacity at that school. Why is it only one school year, and could we allow that student to stay if it's not an over capacity school? And then finally, my last one is the Hope Scholarship. It's in our policy. Does the Hope Scholarship still exist, or did the Hope get put in with the FES?
There is still a Hope Scholarship statute that is on the books. I think it has been folded within the FES program for administration funding and all that. But yes, the Hope Scholarship for, students who are bullied and who have made allegations of bullying, harassment is still statutorily there.
Thank you. That's all, Chair. Thank you so much for
Okay.
indulging me with all that.
And can I just address
Please.
the academic
Yes.
year? So the academic year completion, we came up with a name. It used to be the mid-year transfer, but that was confusing. So what happens is the parent has moved out of the zone, and they may have moved out of county or whatever the situation is. It's a code in Skyward where we can update the address to allow the student to remain at that school until the end of the school year. And then if the school is on the controlled open enrollment or they're rising, because they're completing, they can apply for the next year's transfer to remain. But it's only at that time of the year that we're able to do this code in Skyward. So it's a little method behind the madness.
Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Okay. Let's do this. I'm going to take you all in the order that you're here. To the extent that you are responding to one of the issues brought up by Member Gallo, kind of flag that for me so I can keep track of it. To the extent it's a new issue, let me know that as well when we start, okay? And, okay, let's start with Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to comment on one thing that she talked about, but also something that was brought up about magnet schools.
Okay.
And I also do agree that we'll never land the plane on this, but I think that this is a great starting point of this conversation. I think we're going to have multiple conversations about this for sure.
And I think somebody's going to have to watch this video or transcribe it. Okay.
Okay, so as far as the magnet schools, I completely agree with you. And I've been talking about this since I got on the board, actually 6 years ago, that I have always felt like our magnet programs are, while they are wonderful, and my child took advantage of a great one at the Boone Law Magnet, but again, I was able to drive her 45 minutes every morning. That being said, I think that one thing that I've talked to even the superintendent about is that I believe that we really do need to look at our magnet programs, assess which ones are successful, which ones are doing really well, and then look at replicating those ones that are good. I also really feel like magnet programs need to be run through the district and not at a school by school basis, because the concern there is when that teacher who's running that program leaves the school, then the magnet program falls apart. If the magnet program is not a program that has, real strong like curriculum guidelines and, guardrails and everything else that's really monitored, then I think that that's a real issue. What I would like to see happen is the most successful ones be replicated and then put in regionally. And then I agree with you that we have to provide some kind of depot pickup or, whatever we can do, because otherwise it is just one more area that the haves and have nots get to participate in. And I think they're really great, and I would love to see more of our kids be able to do that. So I agree with you on that. As far as the overcapacity with the with the schools and transfers, my question to that is, why some of these really overcapacity schools have magnet programs and have allowed transfers in for some reason. So if we do that, then why would we not allow the sibling, would be my question. And, like when my daughter went to the Boone Magnet, my other child was not in high school. They were too far separated. But had she been, I don't know how I would have done, two separate across towns. I wouldn't have. I would have either pulled, or I would have, I don't know. I would have wanted to get her in that school as well. But if, they are not on the open capacity list, that's an issue. So my question to that is, why would we approve any transfer into an overcapacity school, period? End of story. Like, why are we even doing magnet programs into a school that is severely overcrowded if we're not willing to at least allow the siblings to continue in that school? So that's my question about that. I am also very concerned about the
Revocation? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Revoking transfers, because my concern with that is that they can be a little selective. And I don't know that they are. I'm just saying they could be. And while I understand that, there's this concern with, maybe a child that's not putting forth any effort, causing major discipline issues and all of those things, but they're there by choice. I agree with Member Gallo that I'm not really understanding how that's any different than we pull that child out of that transfer and put them back in a zone school, and now that school has to deal with the same child that is not putting forth effort and causing all kinds of discipline problems.
I think we have two revocations, so I want to be clear. Are we talking about revocation for behavior? Are we talking about revocation for not meeting C? Or both?
No, it says in there that it can revoke based on excessive tardies.
Okay. Okay, that one.
Referrals for disciplinary action. And I know I've had one that there was a lot of discipline issues. So I don't like the idea of schools picking and choosing which students they serve, I guess, is kind of based on discipline or attendance. I do understand them, not being able to provide the transportation to get there. And I think that that's where, a lot of counseling and conversations happen. Maybe this isn't the best choice for your child to be here, if that kind of thing. And I get that we try to do that, but I just have a little bit of concerns about it being used not always in the best interest of the child, but maybe the best interest of the school. And so that's where that concern comes from for me. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Member Salamanca.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, a couple of things. One, Stacy, I've worked with you. I did have Lake Nona High School and the beauty of a lot of overcrowded schools. So I just want to say thank you, because it's been great to work with you. I know that there's nuance in the process, and you've always shown up in a way that, at least in my cases, thinks about the full family and the full student. So thank you for that and your team. And I know that there's a lot coming, and every case is interesting. The part where we talk about the denial of an application, and it talks about being false and erroneous, I treat those a little bit different, and I want us to treat them maybe more explicitly different, right? There is an application that is false, and I've had parents that do change addresses and do kind of they're not transparent, and it's clear that they just want to stay in these schools, and this is kind of false information. But there are a lot of parents that are overwhelmed by the process and just create errors in the application. And when we deny such applications, sometimes it can be really confusing. And I've found that there's a lot of back and forth with the errors, that they provided the wrong document or the wrong thing. And so one, I think being more explicit about the list of documents, being explicit about what's an and or an or, any of, is really important. And that's just like communication of this, and then the policy and then the material we have. But when there are errors that are not perceived to be just falsehoods, I think there is a place where, and I know, Stacey, you work on it case by case on like, this is what it is. But in general, if we know what are the most common errors on these applications, I think providing some more tips or advice or understanding of like, hey, we see these common errors all the time, and we could save our enrollment team a lot of time if we just tell parents, these are the most common errors in applications, make sure you address them. That's not a policy thing, but I think it could go a long way in saving us time, and I do want us to separate falsehoods from erroneous mistakes in these applications, so that's one. I agree with Member Gallo that because we have all this IEP language, it's clear that if it is IEP or other accommodations, it's pretty clear. So I think in the other areas, we can be a little bit more explicit. In terms of revoking, so one of the issues I have with that one, if we can go to number 5 on revoke.
Page 5?
Yep, right there.
Thank you.
Disciplinary action, I think here, I'm fine with keeping it in terms of course, if a student's having a lot of this, if we keep it, I just want us to be more explicit. We have levels of discipline. And I think there are levels that perhaps we can come back from and levels that we can't, right? I don't want a student being revoked over level 1 or level 2 and then having selective enforcement of what we revoke or not saying that it's happening. But I would appreciate if we do keep this disciplinary action component, let's be clear about level 3s or level 4s. Like, we've done some thoughtful thinking on discipline for a reason. So I'm all for making it more clear. When it comes to tardiness and absenteeism, so when I got transferred, and I imagine it was an academic transfer because it was an ESOL program that was only available at Lake George Elementary, but it wasn't at McCoy Elementary at the time. And I had to ride my bike instead of I didn't have transportation because I wasn't zoned for it. But the reason I was going was because McCoy didn't have the English language component that I needed for full immersion to learn English. And I really wanted to learn English, but I was in 2nd, 3rd grade. And what I do remember was I had to ride my bike. One time my bike got stolen. I didn't live in a great place. My bike got stolen and I was tardy multiple days because instead of bike, I had to walk to school. There were times when things just happened and I had to be absent. But one of the things that I always thought as a student was as long as my grades are up to par, I hope my tardiness and absenteeism wouldn't hurt me. And so I do, when it comes to equity here, what I want to maybe just make sure we're not doing is, as long as the student's performance, academic performance, is up to par in some way, and I know we have C or above as maybe the threshold based on some other place in this document, I don't want tardiness and absenteeism, knowing that we do not provide transportation to be a reason why we revoke a transfer. I understand disciplinary action, especially if we're talking a magnet school or some reason where you are taking the seat of another student that isn't getting level 3s and level 4. So I'm okay with keeping disciplinary action, but I do want to be very mindful of tardiness and absenteeism because I understand it can be a burden on staff and catching up. But some of these students they're just trying their best on academically, and if they're providing their own transportation, it's hard. That's my point on that one. Let's see what else.
To clarify on that one, this language, though, doesn't say that it'll be revoked. It says it may, which encompasses, it may not be as clear as you like, but it does encompass the discretion of the school.
I have concerns with discretion. That
got
you
it.
could override academic performance with absenteeism and tardiness.
You would like a specific.
Yeah, I do not want the discretion of some of this stuff overriding academic performance.
Got it. Okay.
That's my preference.
Yeah. No, I understand.
The other one is, so on the academics of C or better, I'm with Gallo in that privilege is a little bit out the door as we try to be competitive. But if a student is taking the seat of another student that is in that zone for a magnet program or academic program, I'm okay with having that academic standard. I don't know if it's C. I don't know. I don't know what that GPA component is. I definitely defer to staff and teachers and principals on that. But yeah, I believe that if a student is doing well, regardless, they should be given the benefit of the doubt in some of this other stuff. And that's just maybe from my own experience why I thought about it that way. Because life happens and some of this stuff goes down, but as long as you're kind of trying your best and working at it, I believe we should not be so harsh on that. Let's see, what else do I have? Okay, so this goes to the broader conversation. One, thank you, Member Gallo, for bringing this conversation up, because I also worry a lot about our competitiveness. And I believe that the enrollment office is mostly just the referee on the policy, but they're not really it's our job to be thinking big about what we're doing to stay competitive. And I'm almost curious in our ways of getting creative, and I know Member Vano's mentioned a few things that we could do. Like, what if we start having more of like an enrollment marketplace where it's like not this year, but 1 or 2 years out, parents know that they want to go to Boone Legal or Boone Finance, and they kind of put a bid in this arbitrary enrollment marketplace, and another parent wants to go get out of Boone to go to Winter Park. And we start having a little bit more of a predictive approach to enrollment, but it's kind of swapping of the seats of parents that are both kind of opting in to do this. That allows the data to be cleaner, predictive. I don't know if other districts have done it, but I can imagine there's some world where we have a year or two head start on a enrollment marketplace. So that would be one of the things I would consider. There could be a world attached with this enrollment marketplace. We also speak to transportation, and if there's enough people from this one school or some service that we can attach to this enrollment marketplace, I think my priority would be to keep these dollars in the district. And so I'm sure that if we can keep these folks who would otherwise go outside of Orange County, maybe there's some transportation leeway we have on providing it for this, call it, enrollment marketplace. But that's just me being a little creative and innovative here. And we'll let the folks know how that would be implemented. Thank you.
Perfect. Member Front.
Thank you. This really has been a great conversation. And I think there's a lot to unpack. We've been talking about a lot of different things. The sibling transfer definitely is like top on my list. I think if we're allowing a sibling in, if there's open enrollment or a student is allowed to go to a school because they've transferred, they meet all the criteria, any sibling attached to that, whether they're a step, but to me, they would need to like live in their home or be a part of their family. Like, I know some are like, they're there for the week and then they're with another parent for the week, but somehow they're very integrated with the family. They should just be allowed to go in as if they're zoned for that school. The same way we wouldn't say, hey, we're at capacity now. I'm sorry. I know you're zoned for our school, but our school is at capacity. We just now are over capacity. So to me, I hope that makes sense, but once a student we've deemed them like, okay, yes, you're eligible to transfer. You've got all the stuff. Any sibling coming up should be allowed to, as long as that child is in that school, I feel like the sibling should be allowed to attend, as long as they have, I don't know, if there's some, crazy something where they don't have what they need, like what Member Salamanca was saying with the ESOL, like if there's something like that where, hey, I know you want to come here, but I think this school over here might be a better fit for your family, something we could discuss. One question I do have is, do all parents have to go through your department in order to enroll their child in school?
No one comes to the office to enroll.
Okay, that goes...
Enrollment happens directly at the schools.
Okay, that's what I thought. And transfers...
Come through our office, yes.
Okay, so I think that's maybe where some of the confusion could come from. Then if there's a parent that's like, I want to transfer, I don't know if that ever happens where now they're going to the school. If they go to the school and say, I want to transfer, the school then directs them to your office, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I need.
Hence the name student enrollment.
Well, no, I get you. But I think there was some questions here that there was some confusion and parents weren't understanding where to go. So I think that makes sense. And I think as long as the schools are, because that's really the touch point for our parents. They're going to go to their local school, talk with them, and as long as the school is directing them to your office, there should not be an issue. Let me see what else I have put here. Okay, the change of address. One question I do have, I've noticed this year I had this issue, but I've had it before. But so midway through the year, there's almost like an address check. Is that correct or no?
So we're currently doing audits at certain schools. I mean, we're going to do them all, but we're systematically doing audits. So yes, parents do have to provide updated proof of an address, and the rising fifth graders going into middle school and the rising eighth graders going into high school have to provide proof of their updated residence. And that's only because our system allows parents to just roll. Once a student is enrolled, they just roll from grade to grade, school to school. So we're doing the checks now, and we started with fifth grade, the rising grades.
Would it be helpful at all where every year a parent has to just submit one proof of address every year before you can continue with the year? You would just provide that.
That is what is supposed to happen. However, we have registrar turnover, and it gets hard for them to keep up with who they have. So we said this would be a way to start working at getting. It's a culture change. It is. I think Gallo said it. And what we're doing is we set a bar, and it's the hopes that people will rise to it. Not saying it is going to make it, but we don't want to give that out to parents so easily. So yes, it is what is required or should be done, and the parents are supposed to do it every year, but they do not.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there a way, so I had it, and maybe this is something we could discuss, but I had a student this year was in the middle of her senior year. Parents moved out of, you probably remember this one. So moved out of county, and she wanted to remain at her school to graduate with the school that she had gone to for the last 3.5 years. That is a decision that the parents made to move out of county. However, is there a way for us to do some sort of exception?
We make the exceptions. The problem is, once again, we have policies and procedures in place, and we try to have hold parents accountable. And the reason is, during COVID, a lot of families bought houses out of county. So we're talking about 2021, 2020, and they have not been in the county for 4 or 5 years. And so when it is finally brought to our attention, we address it. We work with them as much as we possibly can, right? Especially for seniors. But the problem is the parents are not forthcoming with the information, and they get mad because they get caught. Mm-hmm. So, but we have things in place that we try to work with parents, but we have to have it
in writing. No, I get you. And I think we do have to have rules, and otherwise people would just run all over us and take advantage of every situation. So I'm all about having the rules. Just curious about that one. And then I just wanted to say I do agree with Member Salamanca that I think we should really focus on that the academic performance over tardiness or absenteeism. I think having your own personal experience, that's really helpful. Because it helps us kind of put it into the perspective of a lens of a child. So it's not necessarily that they're just not wanting to show up or whatnot. Sometimes there really is those circumstances. And I think when you're looking at a kid, so let's say your mom were able to drive you, but she was had to get another sibling to a different school, and then by the time she got you to your school, you're a little late every day. Well, it's not your fault. And it's, in that sense. So I do think as long as the student is achieving those high academic standards that we're looking for, at least a C, I don't know if that's really high, but that whatever the standard is set that we've got, I think that would be great. But I think my biggest thing for me on this is just that the siblings of students, that they would be allowed to come in.
And just, can I add this? So 2 things. A C is a 2.0 GPA, right? You need a 2.0 GPA to graduate. Anything below that.
Ms. Neal, I'm sorry. I apologize
No.
here's my concern. We have 14 minutes. We have a hard stop at noon because we have a lot on our plate. We have 2 more board members who haven't been heard at all. So, and we're not going to land the plane. So I really want to hear from these 2 board members, if we could. And I'm going to ask both more board members, Member Felder, Member Douglas, to be as concise as possible in your comments so we can hear from each of you. Member Felder, you're recognized.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Neal and her team because I have been in and out of their office regarding some constituents within my district and some who are not in my district regarding the transferring of students and going to schools. Let me just say this. There was a situation that they attended to the need of a family that I was so happy about because the English was null and void. And Ms. Neal, it was 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening on a Friday, and she was able to get a translator like through her phone or whatever to try to find out what the situation is. She and Mr. Moody, nevertheless, it was attended to. So listening to other board members talking about siblings, especially when Member Gallo, the fact that having the opportunity for siblings to be at school, and Ms. Neal explicitly said that usually in elementary years, if you have a sibling that's like 5 years old and the other sibling is like 12 or 11, and it's a K through 8 school, they made availability for that family, for those children to be together. And I just want to just tell you thank you. It does happen. We are able to kind of get them together. And in relation to what in regards to what Member Salamonica talked about with the Magnet program and some of the other board members and Member Byrd, I do have some issues because I taught at a magnet school when Dr. Phillips first opened. It was a performing arts magnet school in 1987. And there were some issues about threats to students who, if they did not keep the GPA up or, they were going to be put out. That is a concern. And I guess at this time, in 2025, we might want to revisit that thought process of putting people out because of disciplinary action. But then again, if it's a magnet program and you have a limit to the students, and then you have somebody who's there taking up seats and they're not doing what's required, what can you do about that? You have to deal with that. So I have mixed, and you say we might not land the plane, and we probably won't. I do have some mixed feelings about that because I worked at a magnet school that it was a coveted school. People all over the district was trying to go. So I do have some issues, and we probably need to revisit and probably redo policy as it relates to that. And thirdly, I do want to, and I haven't heard any board members kind of talk about it yet, but maybe this is something that may can go somewhere else, Chair Jacobs. But we do have schools in this district who will reject students. I don't know what their reasoning is, but they tell the parents that you might not fit in this this student body. You might need to be somewhere else. And I know that's hearsay, but as we are nitpicking and addressing the issues our schools deal with our children, we have to remember our first business is to educate children and not to determine whether or not you fit in this environment. If I ever hear of it, none of my schools and in my district, I haven't had that kind of situation, thank God. But if I ever get in a position and I'm seeing and I hear that, well, I don't know. I guess John Palmery and whoever the lawyers are may have to come do something with me, because I'm not going to take that. I'm telling you, I will not at all. So maybe that could be something, Chair Jacobs, that I don't know whether anybody else have felt that in the district. You board members have heard those kinds of information.
I think that's encapsulated in a lot of what I heard. So when I recap, I think one of the things a lot of board members have alluded to.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you. And
thank
lastly, thank you so much, Chair Jacobs. About the transfers, I know exactly what Miss Neal, I had an issue. It wasn't in my district, but because the person knew me, where parents, they weren't separated, but they were saying they were separated because they wanted the child to go to a particular school. And their office, I mean, I didn't realize the magnitude of the kind of work that they do and people assignment, and I'm wondering if they need guards up there. But I'm just saying it's really something. And a lot of times as board members, we really don't get the ins and outs of really how these people manipulate and maneuver to try to get. And I get it. You want your child, that's your baby. You want your child to go to what you think is the best possible school, but then sometimes by any means necessary, you do stuff, and then the pupil assignment people and the district, we're left vulnerable to kind of come behind and fix this foolishness. So again, Chair Jacobs, we're not going to land this plane. And this has been a very healthy conversation. As I listen to my fellow board members, we are going to have to come back and revisit this and deal with policies intricately as we deal with what is the right thing to do in terms of us as a district and a board of a district, and also working with our pupil assignment people, because it's a lot. So those are my points. Thank
All
you
right,
so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Member Douglas.
Yes. Oh, wow. Okay. Member Gallo has impacted a lot of issues, and they're all very valid. I appreciate you for this conversation. It's really apropos, and it's supposed to happen. However, I really believe that this conversation should be brought to the principal and the teachers, because they are personally involved in this decision making that we're making at the moment. And I really believe that as our superintendent is doing a town hall, maybe we should bring one or two of these issues to the teachers and the principal at that time, and get a little bit and pick their brain and get a little bit of their ideas about what could happen and what will be the solution to some of those questions that we have right now. Also, I agree with the sibling to put less burden on parents, okay? Let's have all the kids be in the same schools. I have traveled with my kids. I have 3 kids. One was in a Apopka, the other was in the other one was in Citrus Elementary, and the other one was in Ocoee. It was like I had to travel. I mean, it was way too much for me. Okay, so allowing the siblings to stay in the same school is a great idea. I mean, if we can. Okay. And thank you so much, Ms. Stacy, for clarifying the enrollment, because I thought so that parents should go to schools to enroll their kids. It's just for transferring that they come to you. Is that right?
Well, other things. Yes.
And among other things, okay. Thank you so much. And somebody, I don't know, I don't remember who said that. Thank you for the sibling ones, it was good. Talking about all the kids can go to all, the parents can choose the school they want for this student. I think there's we should reconsider that. There's a reservation, because that could impact or influence other aspects and factors, just like transportation, for letting those parents choose which school they want to go to. All right. So it's a lot of issues, and truly, I think the principal and the teacher should be aware of it and give their feedback on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to land, well, we're not going to land the plane, but we're going to finish this meeting by 12 o'clock, John. He had a strong request of me last night to try to conclude this meeting by noon. So I'm going to just touch on what I think are some overarching issues, and a theme that I've heard most board members speak to is whatever we do, the language in this policy needs to be more clear and more specific. There's a lot of latitude and flexibility that is built into it, and I think it was intentional, and I think there's valid reason for having that. But I also agree with the board that increases discretion, and that discretion may not be used in the appropriate manner. So work to do there. Second thing, I think there's large agreement, and this is so obvious, but we're in a very competitive environment, and we need to look as we move forward with this in the lens of how do we remain competitive and how do we best tell our story. Some great suggestions along the line. I loved Salamanca's suggestion. Each one of you have offered really, I think, key things that we need to consider in how we do that, with still recognizing that diversity and equity are extremely important. Transportation has come up over and over again, going to be a tough one to deal with, but I think, and I agree, I think it's a very important part of equity. My one thought that I have, I use our search engine a lot, and it's not a real great search engine because I often don't find what I'm looking for, or I find 25 references and I have to figure out which one is the latest and how is it germane. Specifically, I put in transfer, and I didn't get anything. So I think we have some work to do when we talk about promoting our schools and communicating that is a place that's essential. Eligibility has been raised frequently. The issue of what qualifications you have to stay in the school, siblings, open enrollment, all of these have been topics of conversation. So the plan is, I think, is for the superintendent and her team to have a chance to look at all these suggestions, evaluate what is feasible from an operational standpoint, what their recommendation is on different issues, and the basis for that recommendation, come back for another work session with very organized issues that you all brought up. And I like I said, I've tried to take really good notes. All the subjects were important, but allow us to get a little bit more organized and then how we approach that. So I think with the value of the superintendent and her team being able to consider everything that's brought up, we will come back, won't probably land the plane that time, but we'll get closer to understanding where the board as a whole is. So I'm going to wrap this up with one last comment, and that is, I do think this is one of the best work sessions that we've had from the standpoint of the engagement of the board and the serious thought of each one of you. And I always enjoy working with each one of you, but I appreciate the way everybody comes to the table with, I want to say, a pure heart and the best intentions. With that, Member Byrd, Vice Chair, only because, oh my God, I have two members. You guys are going to have to keep it to 30 seconds. Okay. Member Gallo? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I recognize we have to go into closed session at noon. We do have another item on the agenda that we're obviously not going to get to today, which disappoints me.
I know.
This happens far too often, so I'm a little aggravated, because far too often we have stuff on our agenda and we schedule stuff right around it, and we're not able to get through the work of this board in one session. And we've complained about it, and we've complained about it, and we've complained about it. And here we are today, and we're going to have to revisit the ethics policy, which I was hoping to get to today, because something else was scheduled. So, and I wasn't, as a board member, I wasn't told that we were going to cut this work session short to attend that closed session. So I'd like to know when we're going to revisit the ethics and how in the future we can stop this from happening.
Okay, one thing I do want to say that this is unusual, where we had a situation that is time sensitive, not where we have an unexpected item that comes up that we need to address. Our work sessions do go longer than is budgeted consistently. Absolutely. Today's situation wouldn't have been enough time probably to handle both of them, even if we didn't have an issue that needs to be addressed right now. Still probably wouldn't have been enough time. So I hear you on that. Superintendent, you want to be recognized before
I do. And so, first of all, I do understand Board Member Gallo's frustration. However, I do need the board to recognize that there are going to be times when there is an emergency meeting that has to be called. And second, it's very difficult to coordinate aid schedules, even when we've asked that certain days be blocked off. There's things that come up for each of the board members that don't allow us then to take the entire day. So we've committed to Tuesdays, and if that's not the best day for the board members, then we need to know, and then we will adjust. But that was the intent about 2 years ago, where I asked, can we just slate Tuesdays? And we have yet to have that situation where we've been able to start early or stick to it because people have things that are scheduled in between. I have a question for Mr. Palmerini. Is there a reason that we have to start right at 12, or can they continue discussions? Are there individuals that are here that are attending that closed session that can't wait?
There's not individuals that couldn't wait. I have a tendency to think that there's going to be a large range of discussion in the next meeting.
Correct.
And it's going to take some time to get through.
Correct, but we don't have our public agenda until 4 o'clock.
That's correct.
So I leave it to the board. I mean, we have until 4 o'clock before you have that hard stop. You could take some time to talk about the ethics policy or not. I leave it to you.
If my personal opinion on this, the ethics policy is extremely important. If this took 2 hours, and we got, I think, most of the issues on the table. If we open the door to ethics, I don't think we're going to get anywhere close to even getting the issues on the table, most likely. So we'll be short, even if we had 2 hours for ethics. I have no idea how this next meeting is going to go. This meeting went 2 hours. We didn't finish it, and it isn't time sensitive. We don't have to land the plane. We have to land the plane at the next one. So my strong suggestion, I will defer to the board, is that we adjourn this meeting, we come back on ethics, set aside 3 hours instead of 2 hours for ethics, and move on with the next meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm fine with that. Do we have a date when ethics is going to come back before the board? Because we've waited several months to discuss ethics. I get the nature of the importance of the next meeting. It is frustrating as a board member that we're just never allotted. We take a long time to discuss things, and it feels like we're always running out of time because we've got to get to the next thing.
Right. I hear you. I also hear the superintendent that we are likewise a part of the problem because of scheduling. No one individual. I'm going to have a problem with Thursday. My understanding was we were supposed to set aside Tuesdays and Thursdays, and best laid plans doesn't always happen. So I think I hear you, Madam Superintendent. I think it's a valid point. I certainly hear you. I'm always myself in the same situation when never have enough time, but we have to make the time. Member Byrd, Vice Chair, you're going to close us out, and then we're going to adjourn.
We have to advertise specifically what we're talking about at a work session? Like, could we add ethics to our Thursday session, which is already scheduled for 3 hours?
We could, Madam Chair, may I?
Please, absolutely, you're recognized.
We could absolutely say that. We could say we're continuing the discussion on the lobbying and ethics until Thursday, if the board desires to do that.
Right.
I have no issue with that.
I mean,
legally.
we're already here. It's scheduled for 3. We could even add an extra hour and make it a 4-hour session if we need to.
Excellent.
And then also the reason I buzzed in is because I was just going to ask if we could, before our next session, when we talk about the student assignments, if we could maybe get a few policies from other districts on student assignment. I think it would be really informative to be able to see what other districts are doing.
Great suggestions.
That's it.
Okay. Procedurally, I am supposed to call for a motion to adjourn the meeting. You all know I have never done that, but I should do it. So we have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a second?
Hold on.
Pardon me?
Is the direction?
I'm sorry.
No, is the direction
Ethics?
from the board, I would ask that if we're going to do it on Thursday, that the board move and approve, or give consensus at least, to moving policy KCE to Thursday to
Yes.
add it onto the agenda.
Absolutely.
And then we can adjourn.
Okay. All right. So does the board agree that we should adjourn this meeting but carry over the ethics policy to Thursday? Motion to accept? Okay. All right. This Thursday. We have a work session on Thursday. Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair. Do we have a second? Second. You can't motion and second it.
You said Vice Chair. I thought I forgot I'm the Vice Chair.
You're Vice Chair. You were the one who sat in this chair earlier. Okay, how are we doing? That's okay. All right, we have a second by, I think that was Member Vanos. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned. You made me feel good. Oh, I